Hello, everybody. Hello, friends, and thank you for joining on this Waitroom discussion. As we start, let me first just say to the Waitroom team, Michael, Vinny, and everybody that's put this incredible platform together, congratulations and well done on all your success, guys. This is absolutely fantastic. The premise for today's discussion, just to quickly kind of tee it off, is to talk a bit about South Africa and what the road ahead looks like, to talk a bit about the challenges we're facing in our country, to talk about the issues that we're dealing with, but also I think the upside, the opportunity, where the risks are, what belies those risks, and what you and I can do to play a part in solutioning around the issues that we've got. So the way that the platform works is everybody who jumps onto the conversation will have 3 hours in discussion, and you may ask a question, and in that 3 hours, you and I have to complete and finish our bit, and we'll be together for an hour. So the idea is that we should get past, at the very least, 20 people. I already see Pascal on the queue, Randy's on the queue, Litseka's on the queue. I do, by the way, think that this is a fantastic innovation. I think it really, really is a great innovation. I can't wait to see it scale up. Right, so let's get started. That's a lovely name. Shailendra, how are you?
Hi, Vusi. Good in you. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Can you hear me clearly?
Where are you coming in from?
I'm coming from Centurion in Pretoria.
Brilliant. What's on your mind?
So, thanks a lot for the opportunity. I've gone through your VT podcast on ideas that matter, and if we think about South Africa in the context of Africa, at one stage, South Africa was kind of in the lead when we came to technology, infrastructure, and business.
Yeah.
Do you think that other countries in Africa have now leapfrogged us and, quite frankly, possibly even leaving us behind, such that we in the technology space need to consider our counterparts up north?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I think, it's a fact, right? There are several pieces of paper that have been published on this. There's a lot of academic literature that's been published on this, Shailendra. But if you think about the fact that in 1994, Rwanda was in genocide, and today it's one of the leading technology hubs of the Southern Hemisphere, without question, one of the top 3 in the continent. And that's the extent to which just Rwanda alone has made headway. I remember traveling to Kenya for the first time. I must have been 21, maybe 22 there or thereabouts. So we're going back about 15 years, say. And, you know, what Kenya was then, what Nairobi was then, and now are very, very different, markedly different. So the continent is moving. And then you look at a country like Nigeria. I mean, if you want to talk about technology, we've now had, as far as I'm aware, 2, if not 3, unicorns come out of Nigeria, right? And in South Africa, we've had, as far as I'm aware, Go One, which is the EdTech platform. So if you look at the data, absolutely we're being left behind. And we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we catch up, brother. You and I are about to run out of time. I'm going to jump next and go to the next person. Thanks, Shailendra. I appreciate the time, brother. Cheers. Masande.
Mr. Thembekwayo, how are you, my brother?
Oh, I'm well, by God's grace. How are you, young man?
I'm well. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Vusi. Firstly, I want to commend you, man. The wonderful work that you're doing is amazing. I'm from Eastern Cape, Kumbu, a very small rural town. I just have one question for you, Vusi. My Growth Fund. Do you guys have any footprint in the Eastern Cape, or are you planning in the near future? Because I'll tell you why. Coming from a small town, Kumbu, you can imagine we had our first KFC in what, 2 years ago in town. So that's how small our town is. So I'm one of the very few that were able to go to university and get a degree. Literally in my family, I was the first to graduate in 2016. So I'm trying to say there's amazing opportunities in Eastern Cape, even though we're a rural town. And I'm also working on something in terms of business. And I believe I've been following my fund, I believe they would assist young people in the Eastern Cape a lot. Thanks, Vusi.
Yeah, great question. Are we in the Eastern Cape at the moment? No, we're not there. We have a playbook. We call it a playbook in the firm. It's our strategy of where we want to go and where we want to grow and where we see the opportunities. And in the short term, we don't have plans to be in the Eastern Cape. I would love to be there. I would absolutely love to be there. But we've got to find a way to be there that is commercially sustainable and that is socially equitable. We've got to find a way to be there that adds value to the young people of the Eastern Cape. As you know, about 3-4 years ago, I built a hub, spent millions building that hub in Thohoyandou in Venda. And whatever happened there happened. But we've actually just completed building our second hub, which I'm very excited by. And we're going to be launching it very soon. I might actually do a Waitroom on it. We're going to be launching it very, very soon. It's based, I'll give you a clue. It's based in the township in South Africa that's had the highest number of service delivery protests over the past 5 years. And we've based it right there so that we can help and assist. So, you know, as resources become available and we're able to do these things, I would absolutely love an opportunity for us to come and eat ibokwe in the Eastern Cape. You know?
We'll host you, my man. Thank you so much, Vusi.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it, young man. Take it easy.
Cheers.
Looks like Tebogo's back. Tebogo, how are you?
I'm good.
Your connection is quite poor, so I'll let you ask your question very quickly.
Okay. I was saying, what do you think would be the solution to solving the economy and the way the rand is right now to place where it's gaining value and it's usually a very strong currency?
Sure. You've asked a lot of questions there, brother. You've asked a lot of questions. So first, I think that the major problem with our economy is that the major problem with our economy, Tebogo, is that the people who, in my mind, had the duty to transform this economy have not done so, and have not done so the extent to which we needed them to do so that we could build an economy that is inclusive, right? There's a bit of background noise behind you. Maybe if you can just mute yourself, and then I'll give you a chance to ask another question. But so the people who had the responsibility to transform the economy haven't done so. The other thing they haven't done, is they also haven't modernized the economy, right? So first you've got a transformation problem in the sense that you've got an economy that wasn't built to absorb the majority of the citizens. Then you have a contemporary problem around whether or not your economy is competitive and whether or not it can box against the best in the world. And you haven't done that either. And you'll remember, you'll remember that for a lot of these people, when they were supposed to be transforming the economy, other things were happening behind the scenes. And sadly, that's the case. They were, in my mind, focused on other things. And that's really where we're finding ourselves now. So you're not going to be able to address the question of how do you take South Africa's economy and bring it to the 21st century until you deal first with the people who are in charge of that economy. You just have to deal with that question. I mean, I'll give you a simple example, Tebogo. I know that I'm speaking cryptically, but I'll give you a simple example. So of the number of businesses that COVID destroyed, and if you haven't seen it, by the way, we had an issue with the number of businesses that COVID destroyed. The number of liquidations, I'll have Vinny on just now, but the number of liquidations that we saw increased markedly, actually, over the period of COVID. And our government created a scheme to assist businesses, the Loan Guarantee Scheme, the LGS. It was Treasury backed and was supposed to be deployed by the banks. And that didn't happen. In fact, of the 200 billion rand, at last count, I think it was just over 20 billion rand that was subscribed. And so people hearing this, you hear billion, 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 you know, and you're wondering, well, you know, what is this guy saying? So think about it. We had South Africa is a 1.3, 1.4 trillion rand economy. In the worst crisis that's hit our economy in arguably a lifetime, if not 2-3 generations, we made available 200 billion to support businesses. And of that 200 billion, only 20 billion, say, was subscribed, which means taken up by businesses. And the reason that's a problem is because if you look at a measure like unemployment, because at the end of the day, all things come down to what metric are you looking at. So if you look at a measure like unemployment, say, unemployment is now at well over 30%, well over the 30% mark. And that's by the narrow definition. I think by the broad definition, it's even higher than that. And yet you consider that Germany, pre-World War II, I think had a 28, 29% unemployment rate. The United States, after the 1929 crash, the Great Depression, it was called, it was such a bad, heinous economic period. They used 2 adjectives to describe it, the Great Depression. They had a 21% unemployment rate. We're at well over 30%. And we still have a monetary, you know, policy instrument that isn't, in my mind, being used effectively to rebuild and redress the economy. This is not a political statement. You know, I'm a free market guy. I believe in capitalism. I believe that capitalism is the least, I believe that capitalism is the most effective of the systems. It's not perfect. It's not without its imperfections, no doubt. But it certainly is, in my mind, the most effective. I believe in the free markets. I believe in private enterprise. I believe in these things. I'm fascinated when people talk about private enterprise like it's the demon. I often wonder, when did private enterprise become so demonic? I grew up in a township where there was a spaza shop, a shebeen. That was private enterprise, right? The taxi owners, private enterprise. So I believe that every single citizen must be given the tools to go out there and make it for themselves, but that they bear the responsibility of making it for themselves. That is not to say the state shouldn't assist. That's what I mean by every single citizen must be given the tools. But when you have the tools, you must then go out into the world and make it. So I believe in that. But even that notwithstanding, there is a time when you recognize that you need fiscal intervention and you need monetary intervention in any system. You need those things. The US has been doing it, printing money and a whole host of things. And I'm not suggesting that that's what we do, but I am saying to you that what we've been doing for a long time. We know that what we've been doing doesn't work, because if it did work, we wouldn't have the problems that we have, right? If the approach to rebuilding and reconstructing the economy worked, unemployment wouldn't be increasing. Business liquidations wouldn't be increasing, right? These things wouldn't be happening. They're happening because the tools that are at play are not effective. Right? That's the first thing to answer your question, is we've got to get more effective tools. The second, which I think is probably the most important answer, and it's in my mind, South Africa's true Achilles heel, is you have to start measuring performance. What performance are we measuring? Right? What performance are we measuring? Yesterday, I was on a call yesterday with let's not mention names, but they're large global institutional capital. And they were talking about a program that they're putting together for one of the agencies of South Africa to help them with a particular issue around SMEs and building businesses. And they said to me, to my shock and horror, that even that agency does not have metrics of measurement. So I asked the question, why wouldn't you have M&E? Monitoring and evaluation is the heart of governance. Why wouldn't you have that? And the reason they don't have it is because the minute they have it, people are going to be held accountable. That's why you don't have it. So it's endemic. If you think about it this way. How many ministers have signed performance agreements? I've never once, guys, and maybe it's just me, but I don't recall seeing a memo saying a minister has been, let go for poor performance. I don't recall seeing that. So we have to move from saying the right things to doing the right things. And in part, I think the impetus is going to be South Africans putting pressure on their government to do the right thing, to put people under pressure, to ensure that there is performance, that there is actual delivery. Because absent of that delivery, we're going to have problems. It's just that simple. Absent of that delivery, we're going to have problems. And if there's one thing the looting of the past few days showed us, and I know I've taken time with this answer, but if there's one thing the looting of the past few days showed us, it is that when the system collapses, all of us are involved. All of us are involved, and all of us get hit. So it's probably worth your while to make sure that you get the system to work. So, the point is, we've got to get the system to work. It's really that simple. It's not complex. We've got to get the system to work. We've got to hold people accountable. We know all the things we need to do. We just need to get down to doing those things, right? To doing those things. So yeah, I think it's just a question of us making sure that we do the right things, holding the right people accountable, holding everybody accountable, frankly. And it starts first with voters, guys. If voters don't hold politicians and the government accountable, then, if voters don't hold politicians accountable, politicians won't hold government accountable. It's that simple. So we are the problem and the solution. We have to hold the people we vote for accountable. We have to insist that the things they said they were going to do, that they do. And we're going to have to insist that anybody who doesn't perform, who doesn't meet their matrix, is asked to move on. And it should be that simple in my mind. It shouldn't be complex. It shouldn't be personal. It shouldn't require any kind of big haggling behind the scenes. In my mind, it literally is that simple. But if we don't do it, then we're going to have challenges. And then just a final note on this, and please help me bring Vinny into this conversation. But just a final note for this, for you guys. You have to remember that time is not waiting. When the looting happened 3 weeks ago, I can't tell you how many calls I took of people who, hey, Vinny, so let me just finish with this. I was saying, I can't tell, to everybody watching, but when the looting was happening 3 weeks ago, I can't tell you how many calls I took from people going, what's the way out of here? Not what's the way out of the looting, what's the way out of South Africa? And here is what you really need to worry about. In 1994, when that conversation happened, I imagine I was 9. The person on the other end did not look like me. Of the calls I took, every single one of the people who made that phone call was Black, and bar a few exceptions, under the age of 40. And all of them professionals, capable, competent, qualified. Because there are some things you cannot racialize. And looking for the best opportunities is one of them. Just, if I have talent and skill, I'm going to go to the part of the world that's going to reward me for my talent and skill, right? And the world is flat now. The internet has literally made the world a village. I'm sitting in Joburg. Vinny, where are you at? You're in San Diego, right? Exactly, right? And you and I, apart from talking about a week or so ago, we still have to break bread because we hadn't chatted in a while, right? Yeah. But I think about your story, and you're a proper example of the kind of loss South Africa can go through if we don't get our act together, right? I think about the amount of wealth you've created, the businesses you've built, the jobs you've created, and where you've done it from. It's in my mind, it's the opportunity cost. And so when people don't understand it, I go, guys, this is the problem. The problem is, the people who leave is not the people who are at the low, it's the people who you want in society, creating jobs, building businesses, creating new economic capacity, people who have reasoning, who can think. That's really the worry.
Yeah, no, thanks, Vusi. I mean, you're 100% right. Like, I call myself an entrepreneur in exile. When I left the country, because it was right about the time the power was failing, everything was Zuma was in charge, and a lot of my journey of being an entrepreneur was in South Africa, and built companies there before I left. But I've seen the same thing. I've got tons of friends in South Africa, smart, educated, looking to leave and say how do we leave the country. And my answer to them is, look, you got to stay and push through. The whole world's got problems right now. Everything's in lockdown. You're going to go from one lockdown to another. And I get the looting stuff, and hopefully that's just temporary. But I want to just thank you for joining Waitroom. I'm one of the team members and investors in the company. You want to let you guys know that you actually, Vusi broke the system for a while. Our engineers, they put up a bug fix very quickly and managed to fix it. But it's like having a door that's open and hundreds of people trying to go through the system. Vusi has an effect on people, and it wasn't me who was trying to get into the door, into the room. So if you're watching and you had a small bug or an issue, just do a refresh on your browser. As you can see, Vusi, the queue's filled up and there's hundreds of people now watching. And so I'll get out of the way here, but I wanted to thank you for coming on and sharing your views. And I think that, this is a really good platform for you and other people to engage and to hear how South Africa should really go forward. I mean, I think it's a beautiful country. It's an amazing country. I miss it. I haven't been home because of COVID. That's the only reason. But I'm always back in the country every year for at least a couple of weeks. And my heart goes out to everyone in South Africa who is struggling through the effects of COVID and everything else that's come from it. But Vusi, thanks a lot. Let's keep going.
Brilliant. I mean, credit to you, Vinny. The number of businesses you've built, the number of South African businesses where you and I are co-investors. So I know that you're not just talking, but you're at the other side and you're sending capital here and building new entrepreneurs and new capacities. So we're going to catch up after this. We'll do a call. Let me
Absolutely.
take Jovan, how are you?
Hi, Vusi. Well, thanks. How are you?
Brilliant. What are your thoughts?
I think I'm just thinking around in terms of the recent looting that took place, but I've also just joined your webinar that was yesterday, Creative Zone. So I think I was just considering in terms of how do we move forward from here and what is next. I think those are my thoughts currently. I just recently took a new position at a company called Holborn Assets, and they deal more in the international space. So I'm just considering, how do we move forward from here? What is next in terms of the business space, in terms of society at large? Because I want to put my hand to the plow and contribute to whatever development that needs to take place, moving forward. So I think those are my thoughts right now. How do we move forward from here? What's next?
What do you do for a living?
I'm a financial planner.
Great. And I'll tell you why I asked that question. Because I think that the most effective way for us to help is to start first with what we spend most of our time doing. That's really and your question is at the heart of the question I imagine most well-meaning, peace-loving South Africans ask themselves, which is, how do I become a part of the solution, right? So my recommendation is the following. My recommendation is do a bit of a search and find organizations that work in communities of need, doing something you're passionate about. So let's say, for instance, you're passionate about early childhood development or education. Then you know that government has a real problem with, they wouldn't admit this, they'll call it a challenge, which is South Africanism for a problem, right? They'll call it a challenge, but they have a real challenge, as they say, with the quality of education that takes place in many of the schools in South Africa, particularly public schools, in particular in rural and township South Africa. Not exclusively, but that's definitely the overweighting. If that's something I was passionate about, I'd look at a partner like Partners for Progress. They do work where they take professionals like yourselves and help them partner with principals in those schools so that you're part of the governing body. You're helping them with issues of governance, of financial management, of procurement, of talent management, talent retention, leadership, all of these things, right? So it's up to all of us as South Africans to get involved, no doubt. And that being the case, it means you've got to find a place where you can come in, plow your skills, do your part, be a part of the solution, because the problem is so big that there is more than enough for all of us to get involved in. Hello, young man.
Hi, Vusi. How are you?
Brilliant.
Yeah. So I wanted to introduce some type of hypothetical statement that I made. So, according to my view, I had this hypothetical statement which states that South Africans will destroy the economy. Right now, the reason so the reason why I'm saying this is because I feel like we're doing more damage than corruption and nepotism that exists in the higher leaders, right? So let's say, for example, the unrest. I just feel like it was so unnecessary, right? And people have kind of like came up with this conclusion that it was all in the name of poverty and being hungry, right? But if we are going to say that each and every time we go hungry, we're going to loot or destroy the economy, isn't that going to like put us 3 steps back from where we are going? Because as South Africans, we have this mindset that we want the United States of South Africa, right? We want 0% unemployment, right? We want 0% poverty, but then we want more. But when we don't get that more, we destroy what we already have. And that is like very detrimental to the economy. So all I'm trying to say is that until we learn to understand how the economy works, that's when we will be able to push forward. Because I feel like people still don't understand that taxes, VAT, they all interconnected, and that's what keeps us going. So each and every time when tax is increased, or food is increased, or the prices, everything, when it is increased, we just kind of like create a spiral, right? That kind of like becomes detrimental to the economy and to us, which puts us steps back, way back to where we want to be.
Olutando, I hear you. Yeah. I don't agree that poverty was used as an excuse. I think it's legitimate. I think there were some people who took to the looting genuinely because they're poor, right? Let me say this to you. If a person is at work and looting happens, no one is going to leave their workstations to go loot. So what South Africans need to realize when they're watching people on TV looting is that those are South Africans for whom the promise of a prosperous South African and inclusive economy has not been realized. And that's the danger. The danger is we've created this, right? And the work we have to do is we have to worry ourselves. Thank you for that. We have to worry ourselves with what are we going to do to fix it. That's the work that we have to worry ourselves with. Bonke, how are you, brother?
I'm all right, man. Thanks. I've actually got 2 questions. The first one will be regarding what happened 3 weeks ago. So here's the small thing I've got to say about that, and the question will follow. So at the core of, sorry, can you hear me? I see I've got a poor connection.
Loud and clear.
I'm back. All right. So at the core, I think, of the unemployment rate at the moment, there seemed to be a discussion about technology replacing people's jobs and the idea of reskilling our workforce to make them more competitive. So my question would be for those guys that are in their, let's say, 40s, that are not as skilled as the younger guys in terms of technology, like data engineering, data science, and all that. How do we retrain those guys? Because they're still young enough. They're not old enough to be retired, but they're just like in the middle. But I just don't know if we can train the guys in their 40s to be competitive enough versus the younger guys, in their 20s.
The premise of
my second question, then you can
let me answer you very quickly, because I think it's important. The premise of your question is wrong, because the premise of your question is that being technology capable or being change able is age-based. It's not. There are many young people who are not technology capable. There are many old people who are very able to change. My sense is that we've got to stop nannying people. Create the impetus, create the programs, and people will go and get themselves retrained and reskilled. Bonke, I don't know if you're like me, but I come from a time when my grandmother used to hold the phone far away and then squint because she couldn't see what was on it, right? And before that, my grandmother didn't even know what the phone could do. Do you understand? Now, God rest her soul, she's since passed. But if my grandmother was alive, I can guarantee you she would be on Facebook. My mother is on Facebook. It worries the hell out of me that my mother is on Facebook. So I think, we shouldn't underplay people's ability to change when they need to. Let you ask your second question.
All right, so I've got 30 seconds now. The second question will be regarding the way forward. At the core of trade in Africa at the moment, there seems to be the Africa Free Trade Area. South Africa is the most industrial country in sub-Saharan Africa. So there is an opportunity to take that, maybe win. But how do we win on the African free trade area without feeling other countries threatened by the idea that South Africa will be a superpower in Africa, you know, and take over the markets? So that's my second question.
Thank you, Bonke. I've noted your second question. I think it requires some deliberate thought, which is around how do we make sure that Africans work together and recognize that within the continent, all 55 countries, and yes, it's 55 with the splitting of the Sudan, all 55 countries have the same goal, which is to see their citizens do better. And I think that that's a question that requires real deliberate thought, real consideration, and requires us to workshop the idea. I can't top of mind offer you an answer. One of the things about me, you guys will learn very fast, is if I don't know, I'm very comfortable saying I don't know. The reason my businesses do well is because I lead people who are much smarter than I am. And when you're a leader, you've got to be comfortable saying, number one, I don't know, and number two, teach me, show me. So, that's my thoughts. Bob Koza, kunjani mfethu?
Hi, how are you, Mr. Vusi?
Brilliant, my brother, brilliant. What are your thoughts?
Good. Yeah, so I just wanted to say, I don't think a lot of people here in South Africa realize that so many of our issues that we're facing are because of poverty and inequality. And unless we solve that issue, it's going to be difficult for us to solve the other issues that we are facing. I'm saying this because I work as an engineer in some company, and we are faced with a lot of debt, especially when it comes to infrastructure. So my company uses so much money in building and trying to renovate that infrastructure. Each and every week, we're facing the same issue. But my question is, how can I play my part, especially if I'm someone who's not business-minded? I feel like I enjoy my career more than the business side. So how can I play my part as a normal South African, as a young professional?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you've asked the question that I think it was Jova asked earlier. The answer to that question, I'll repeat it again. Find something you're passionate about. Find a social problem that South Africa has and get involved. Here are the things that doing will not fix the problem. Complaining is not going to fix the problem. And tweeting is not going to fix the problem. And talking about political parties and who's worse than who, definitely not going to fix the problem, right? So the way to do it is to get involved. I'll tell you a little bit about what I've done, just to give you an example. So I work in the space, venture capital, private equity, I do investments, etc. And when the looting happened, I knew immediately that some of those businesses were going to need money to rebuild. So I instructed my team. We went out looking for capital. We've since raised a 350 million rand debt fund aimed at helping businesses affected either by COVID or the looting with short-term funding using debt as an instrument, right? And that's the little bit I can do. And I think all of us as South Africans have to ask ourselves the question, what can I do? Because sitting on the sidelines is definitely not going to fix it. Paul, how are you doing?
Well, how's it, Vusi? The other day I was watching you. I was watching one of your things on LinkedIn about liquidations of businesses. Yeah. And I made a comment there that people don't know Dr. Enfield in there. And what I found lately is people don't really take the time to learn about entrepreneurship and new businesses. Especially the young people, they all have this, I have to go work, I need to find a job mentality. And we need to teach the youth to also start looking at building their own businesses.
I agree. Sadly, Paul, I think that, it's the issue is a bit more complex than that. My experience is that there are a lot of young people who, in particular, have to find jobs because by the time they finish schooling, their parents, their families have spent everything sending them to school and sending them to university. And I can speak with some authority on that. Like by the time you get to university, your mom, your dad has spent their life savings. They've tapped into their pension and a whole host of stuff just to send you to university. So you're not in a place where you can take the risk of starting a new business, sadly. So I think the issue is more complex than that. And we've got to find a way of addressing the issue without downplaying its complexity.
Look, I don't come on here to market my business, but there are options for you, for all South Africans, especially through our business, which is very cheap and innovative to start, and people can do it on the sideline, and still people need to do research. I think that's the main thing. People don't do research anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's also, you know, in part true. I think that, you know, doing research has a lot to do with having the ability to access resources, to access knowledge, to understand what's out there. But you know, I've spent more than my fair share of time with people who are South Africans who just don't have the means, and it's tough. No doubt, if you are entrepreneurial, you should definitely look at doing it, right? So on that, you and I agree. I think that the challenge is we also have to understand that not everybody is entrepreneurial, and some people will want to seek employment. Some people will want the safety of a job. Some people prefer the structure of a big business, of a guaranteed salary, and you know, all of us have a different role to play in building our society. So, thanks, Paul. Masande, you back?
Yes, I'm back. We'll see. I just rejoined the queue when I saw that people are not coming in. Vusi, mine is a follow-up. I was listening to Professor Somato Tafikeni last week Sunday, and he was presenting on their project of Indlulamity Scenario 2030. And my follow-up question is that, Vusi, what can we do as young business leaders in Eastern Cape to create the environment that you mentioned, in order to make sure that my growth fund is able to come there? Because I really see the need. We'll see. I was going through your 2020 report, the enterprise and supply development. I was like, oh my goodness, the work that these guys are doing, we really need it in the Eastern Cape. And yes, it's not going to happen overnight to create the environment. But my question is, what can we do for now? Because we'll say it breaks my heart, man, when government organizations that are set there to do what my growth fund is doing, they are just sitting. They're just sitting in their offices. I spend like 60 rands, we'll see, to travel from Kumbu to Mthatha, having made an appointment with someone in the organization. And when I get there, they forgot about my appointment. And I'm like, how is that possible? You forgotten my appointment. Now I must hike back home again, spend another 60 rands again. It breaks my heart so much. And I really see the need of my growth fund. And my question is, what can we do to make sure that you guys get there quicker?
So you know, which social media platforms do you follow me on?
Facebook, YouTube, and the podcast.
Inbox me on Facebook.
I will.
I don't run my social media, by the way, but I'll ask one of my social media people to you know, connect with you and see what we can do. I think that the question you're asking requires a bit more time. It just requires a bit more time and consideration. But I do want to say the following to government about these government agencies. We spoke to one beginning of this year. The CEO brought me in to present to his entire exco. And the comment that came out of the exco, they said to me, you guys are doing the work we should be doing. They admitted it. They then asked us to send them a proposal of what we could do together and how I could help them scale impact. Masande, we sent that proposal. I want to say it's been 3 months. They just haven't returned phone calls, no emails, no nothing.
Oh my goodness.
Right. So I know my son has dropped off, but I think the point I'm trying to make is that until we have to find a system of holding people accountable, until people are held accountable, the results are not going to change. Tabani, you look like you're standing basking in the sun, brother.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Let me get straight to the question, brother. Thanks for this, by the way. Look, my question is linked to what Masande is asking, and it's about what does a young person, and two, three practical steps. What does a young person who's filled up with fire, passion, wanting to make a change, met with resistance because of, you know, the powers that be via the gates of government and these government institutions do when they are blocked by that and they find themselves discouraged, losing hope and their sense of agency and trying to instill change in their respective communities? What are the practical steps that can help us go over those boundaries, Vusi?
You know, Thabani, I think that the answer to that question is a question. And I'm going to answer your question by posing a question. And here's the question. Why have we not created a standalone organization through which we can organize ourselves in numbers to mobilize for the things we feel are important to us? Because the reason that young person, the reason Masande is being ignored is because he's alone. Let me put it to you differently. The power of political parties is that they know ideology without organization is useless. So they organize themselves into a political party so that they can argue their ideological point. And maybe we as young people need to take a cue from that. I say we, I'm 36, so I don't fall into the not even by the ANC Youth League definition. I'm not youth anymore, right? But you know, I think maybe we need to take a cue from that and ask ourselves the question, why have we not organized ourselves into an organization that becomes a platform for us to speak about the issues that are important to us? And we can create an organization and have chapters. You can have a business chapter. You can have a civic society chapter. You can have a constitutionalism chapter, an education chapter. You know, I think that might be the way to do it.
And the organizations that exist that are currently doing that, how do you think, or where do you think they're failing? Vusi?
I don't know. I don't know enough about them to have an educated opinion about what issues they may be facing or where the shortcomings might be. It might be funding. It might be access to platforms. It might be that they're doing amazing work and we just don't hear about it. I don't know enough to have a view. Thank you so much for that question. Vikis, Ukhanet.
Lekker itself.
Lekker, brother. What's on your mind?
Yeah, so I was also actually going to sort of ask the same question as the person before me, to kind of talk about how do we go about holding the people that are responsible accountable for, you know, running the country, that sort of thing. And but I think, you know, what you said just now about we need to organize ourselves is very true. You know, I think it's a matter of how do we do that.
Yeah. And, you know, so let me just say something. That question is so powerful. How do we do that, right? Because I think one of the things to think about, and an acquaintance of mine, I had a meeting with him 2 days ago, said to me, something was so powerful. He said, maybe we need to start thinking, from a position of commonality, not a position of difference.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
That's very important.
Because if we're going to organize and if we're going to organize and push things in a particular direction, then we do need to start thinking from a position of commonality. Vusi and Vikis might be different races. They might have different backgrounds. They might even come from, want different things. But what do they have in common? What they have in common is that they're South Africans. They want to see their country succeed and they want the best opportunities for their kids, right?
Exactly.
And I think we live in an era where our differences have been so amplified that we don't even know what we have in common.
Wow. That's so true. Thanks. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And the other thing I wanted to ask you was, so there's two more things, is are you using the beauty filter?
No. No. This is all me, bro. This is all me.
And then when are you guys launching Silicon Gauteng? Silicon has been going for so long, and I've been stuck here in Gauteng without any, I'd like to see something like that in Gauteng. I think,
brother,
there's so many technology workers in Gauteng. I think.
I know. I know. I can't tell you, I've been under a lot of pressure from a lot of guys to go, look, you know, we need a Silicon Joburg or a Silicon Jersey or something like that. And I think it's time. I think it's necessary. So I can't commit to timelines. It's not even, you know, but what I would say is, you know, let's put our heads together. Let's watch the space and let's see what we can do. I'd be very excited to see if we can put together something like that.
That would be great. Thanks.
Brilliant, Vikas. I appreciate your time. Thanks for jumping in. How do I say your last name, by the way? Verena.
Verena.
Right. Brilliant. Thanks, brother. Take it easy.
Cheers. Thanks.
Nice call. Leroy. I'm well, my brother, by God's grace. How are you?
Good, yourself? All right, man. Vusi, I'm a property investor, so I buy these inner city properties, right? Buildings and stuff, and I rent them out affordable. Rentals between 3,000 and about, let's say, 5.5 thousand. Now, I just want to find out all these small businesses closing, right? Restaurants and things. And what are your thoughts? Because there's a huge shortage of housing, but there's also huge unemployment, and there's a lot of small businesses, and these are our tenants, right? These are tenants, these people. And what are your views on that sector of the property market in a city? I'm specifically in Boksburg. You also from the East Rand, I heard that earlier. So I buy these inner city buildings, and we work on another 1 or 2 deals. What are your thoughts about that? And how do you think what's happening now with COVID and with the unemployment and with all these things, how do you think it's going to affect that sector of the property market? There's and by the last one, there's a huge opportunity because all these old guys are selling now, right? They're selling these buildings because they're old and the kids don't have appetite. They either want to leave Australia, New Zealand, wherever, and they're selling it. So there's opportunity for us to come in, get it. Financing is available for it. That's not actually a big problem. Finance is there for it. It's just how is it going to affect our customers, the tenants? I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, at the end of the day, like all things, the property sector, whether you're talking inner city property or not, mix, right? So at the end of the day, is, you know, demand. My sense is that has a lot to do also with the economy and where the economy is at and what's happening. For us to be able to do the right stuff and for you to be able to have tenants in your spaces. But I do think it's a huge opportunity. You know, I travel all over the world, and I can tell you now that many other parts of the world, Europe in particular, figured out what you're talking about maybe 30, 40 years ago and started converting a lot of the inner city buildings and created them as multi-purpose buildings, right? Even malls, they're used for multi-purpose community center. For them, a mall is not just a place to go shopping. It has a whole host of other community sort of services as well. So, you know, I think it's something that should happen. It's something that will happen, no doubt. But it's going to need guys like you to stay steady on the course and to push hard. And to just think about your financing arrangement. You know, in your game, I would think creating a fund that operates like a real estate investment trust might be the best way for you to draw sufficient capital to build something that's scalable.
Okay. Awesome.
Thank you for your time, brother. I appreciate it.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Let's do one more. Hey, Rod.
Hey, how's it going?
Brilliant. Thank you, brother.
Yeah. So I'm a little different. I'm actually in Nebraska, Omaha, Nebraska, in the United States, and I've been following you on LinkedIn and Facebook. And building off what you said earlier, I think COVID has really showed us how we are similar. And I'm hearing all the discussions on here, and to most people, it seems like you're just listing problem after problem after problem. But I'm saying opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And I'm currently in the process of launching a mobile app to help small businesses be able to sell their local goods and services to the community and have them delivered, kind of like a DoorDash, but for every industry. And being that I want to expand in South Africa and the rest of the world, where would you recommend I start learning how those local economies work and see how I can better implement my app to serve those different areas?
Yeah, it's a tough question. Quite what I was expecting, but I would say so the best, so here's the best way to do it is really what you're looking for would be local in-country partners that understand the market really, really well and understand the dynamics well, right? And the best place for you to actually do that is to look at angel hubs, which are in every single country, almost all over the world, and to talk to angel investors that are members of these angel hubs about the structure of the economy, the businesses that are booming, the services that commuters and consumers need, so that you can make sure that when you launch in that country, you have demand. But the reason I would say go through the angel hub route is also because you want to make sure that in country you can have local partners that you can work with and trust. And so they would be a part of an ecosystem that would best be able to help you access that. Does that help you?
Oh, yes, it does. Yes, it does. Thank
Good man.
you so
Thank
much.
you, Rod. I'm going to take the next one. We'll have to jump off, but I want to take one more. Thanks, brother. Hey, Zach.
Hey, Vusi. Thanks so much for seeing me. Listen, I just had a question because a lot of people are mentioning with the struggling government and a lot of youth people are thinking about how they can actually make a difference in South Africa. So I've had an idea for a few months and I kind of just wanted to run it by you. And it's basically a platform for the youth. So it's a platform for people under 30 that can chat and exchange ideas and pick a few problems that South Africa is facing. It doesn't have to be South Africa, it can be Africa as a whole, and how we can actually address them together. But if you look at government, everyone is 60 years and plus. So a lot of those ideas of the young minds are not being heard. So I think personally, a big thing or a big way how to start making change in the country is just to get the young minds to collaborate, and because that's not a thing that's currently available. What's your thoughts on that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it might. I mean, it might. I think those kinds of solutions are a big part of, as this thing is themed, and it's a great way to end our session today, is a big part of what is the road ahead for South Africa. A big part of it. The road ahead is young South Africans like you have to build platforms, the likes of which you're talking about, which take fellow talent, right, and bring it into the mainstream economy so that it can be deployed into that economy. So, I think you're absolutely right. I just bought into a business called Buy My Stuff. And for those of you watching, you can download the app Buy My Stuff on Android and on iStore. And basically what it is it's a platform where any person can go into the platform and open up a store, no matter where you are, and people around you can buy the products that you're selling by knowing that you're there. Because for many micro businesses, people just don't know that they exist. You've got a business around the corner selling Vetkoek. Nobody knows that you sell Vetkoek, right? And because you sell Vetkoek, you're not part of the digital economy. You don't, Take a Lot doesn't buy your stuff in bulk and distribute it. So how do we make you a part of the digital economy? So I think great idea. I would say to you, make sure you've got a good team of people around you. The most important rule of any business venture is have a good team. It's the most important rule around you, right? So that you
then just quickly, if I can, except for poverty, what would your three biggest issues be in South Africa?
Yeah, you're going to get cut off just now. But I think that the three biggest issues around poverty, and Vinny, I'd love to get your thoughts on this just as we close this session, is, the three most important issues for me first is people have to recognize that poverty is an outcome. It's not an input, right? And so the question you got to ask yourself is if on the mathematical equation, something plus something plus something equals poverty. To change poverty, you've got to change the something plus something plus something. And sometimes I feel like we spend too much time on the end result rather than the ingredients. We should actually be spending time on what's the ingredients. So a big part of the ingredients, long-term play, education, Vinny, as you know. Second part of the ingredients, short-term play, is dropping the price of commodities that people need to build businesses and build an economy that is sustainable, right? A third part of the ingredients, short-term play, incentivize capital to invest. We had Section 12J and it was discontinued. You know, it's like, these are the kinds of things that if you do, you create an environment where people will invest. And if people invest, they build businesses. And if they build businesses, jobs are needed, because a business needs tasks to be performed and human beings perform tasks, right? So I think these are, in my mind, we need to recognize that poverty is an outcome. It's not an input. What do you think, Vinny?
You know, I agree largely. Vusi, I think reframing the state of the economy is important. I mean, I think historically we've had this fixation in South Africa on land and land ownership and land as a means of production, which really has changed. I mean, people don't want to own physical assets in the US. Everyone's buying digital assets, NFTs, cryptocurrencies, and the large part of the world that, you know, like this fixation on like land in South Africa, it needs to change, Vusi. It really does. And it needs to be moved towards IP. It needs to move towards higher layers within society.
Can I share? Sorry, Vinny, I'm sorry to interrupt you, brother. Let me share with you my thoughts on the land thing. I think, and it's not a particularly popular position. And, you know, I'm one of those guys. I'm like, look, it's my view. I'm happy to debate it and I'm happy to be corrected. But I think that one of the things we have to recognize is that the thinking that got us into the problem can't be the thinking that solves the problem. If you're solving a problem, you've got to think about that problem outside of the problem itself, right? So if we address the land question as a dignity question, then that's one discussion. We can have a discussion about restoring dignity to people and giving them their land because it is part of their dignity. I don't have an issue with that, and frankly, I would support that. But to your point, I think we need to have a separate discussion about the structure of the economy and where assets of value are, yes, and how do you create value? Because those are two different things, right? And wealth, exactly.
So the importance here is about creating globalized assets. Okay, when you look at South Africa, we have this fixation on localized assets, and what I mean by a localized asset is something like a Bitcoin is a global asset. It has demand in every country in the world. People want to buy it everywhere. It's not localized to South Africa. If you go buy a piece of land in East London, where I'm from, the market for buyers for that piece of land are the people who live in East London. It's a very small market. You're not going to get a buyer from, you know, San Francisco bidding on a property in East London very easily, or very many of them. So South Africans, we need to invest our money in globalized assets, in assets that have global appeal. And that's when true wealth creation comes at a global scale. Wealth creation at a local scale is always going to be a massive subset. And so when people talk about wealth and wealth, you know, redistribution and wealth creation in South Africa, we've got to go past the point of creating localized assets because our market is really small. We have 50 million South Africans, there's 7 billion people. So we should be investing our money in global assets and building global wealth in South Africa where there's global demand for these assets. And digital assets are a perfect example of that because you can build digital assets in any country in the world and attract global markets to it. And it's the whole Silicon Cape premise, right? When we started Silicon Cape, you know, 12 years ago, the premise was that you can create one high-paying tech job in South Africa downstream creates 5 other jobs in the economy, or maybe even more, because one tech guy getting paid back then it was 20 or 50,000 a month, probably a lot more now. You know, he needs a maid, he needs property, he needs to go buy stuff at the local grocer. That trickle-down effect is way more important than a blue-collar laborer or worker earning 5,000 a month, right? So how do we create those jobs in the country? And as you know, I invested in Sweep South, which created tens of thousands of jobs, but those are low-income jobs. But the important thing is I invested in the company, in the entrepreneurs behind that, and they created the downstream job effects. So we have to look at like what is the true store of value in the South African economy in terms of wealth creation. And so land is the bottom of the pyramid. Like it's just a very low level thing where we fixate in South Africa at the political level because you got all the political parties arguing for like land redistribution and land ownership. Who gives a damn? Who really gives a damn? Who owns land? Nobody wants that land. The land is just there to provide some sort of sustenance for the local population. You want real wealth creation? Go and work on globalized assets. It's not always digital. It can be biotech, for example. It could be a whole bunch of other things. But work on creating globalized assets in South Africa that people want around the world. And historically, we've had a very strong footing in intellectual property rights, and a lot of IP and patents happen in South Africa. So we understand the patent and IP framework. Okay, but
let me ask you a question. Sorry to interrupt you, but there was a time we used to do this. This for me is where I get like schizophrenic, because I go, if you study the history of South Africa, we actually have several innovations that are worldwide applications used all over the world, right? When did we become this inward focused, zero-sum game economy? Because right now that's the game. The game is if you win, I lose, right? So we're not thinking multiplier. We're not thinking sum of the parts. We're thinking zero-sum game, take as much as I can, as quickly as I can, and own as much as I can, rather than how do we multiply this? First, when did we get there? And second, how do we fix it?
So we got there, I think, at the transition from apartheid to democracy, because unfortunately, there is a strong, uneducated part of South Africa, and so populist policies at the political level actually gain momentum. So the populist views are the ones that were the lowest common denominators in South Africa will vote for these, the idea of like free land and free this and a socialist sort of market for people who don't have the ability to create value and wealth, and they're very much low-end laborers. So this is one of the problems with this transition of democracy, right? And what I'm seeing in South Africa right now, which is fantastic, is you have a rising middle class in terms of education, ability. I mean, your followers are a good example, Vusi. People who actually think deeper about things and think, okay, that was the past. How do we work towards the future? And how do we build a better South Africa? And using our brains, not our arms, like moving away from a labor-based economy to an intellectual capital-based economy. And I think it's happening. It's a function of time. Because with technology today, with the youth all have mobile phones, they're all on Facebook, they're all on Instagram, all on YouTube. They're learning, and they're learning for free. Education has become free. You can go to Wikipedia, Khan Academy, YouTube. You can learn for free, and people are educating themselves. So I don't think we're very far away from the rising middle class, the youth of South Africa taking control of the country in the next decade or less. And Vusi, I mean, there's lots of calls for you to run for president of South Africa. I don't think it's out of the question either. I think it's very possible. Do I think the existing political party populist policies will win? Maybe they will, but those policies, unfortunately, or for them, is proven not to be working. And so
they have a sell-by date. Yeah.
It is a sell-by date. And so whether it's the next election, 2024 or 2029, I do think we're going to see some change in South Africa. But unfortunately, democracy does mean that every man has a vote, even though their insights are different.
Democracy means every man has a vote, even though their insights are different. You know what I love about our conversations? I always leave with like a soundbite that I can use in a keynote. Democracy.
You apply that deliberately, don't you?
But I think that, and apart from that, just the final thought is that this issue around free for me. So I lecture at a couple of business schools, and was given a cohort from one of the leading minds in South Africa. And in the room, so they briefed me. They go, geez, these guys don't get along. There's the unionists here, the board trustees here, the mine manager here. Very adversarial group, right? And so I'm starting the session, and I open up the session with, the economy, South Africa's history, the role mining plays. And as this is happening, I can tell the room builds up a bit in tension. And one of the guys puts up his hand and, he says, no, this is, neoliberalism and capitalism and destroyed the country, And by the way, for the people watching, I think that's a big part of the thing South Africans have to learn. We have to learn not to be slaves of ideology, right? Capitalism, socialism, forget the isms. What works? That's the question we should be asking ourselves. It's what practically is going to work. So anyway, and as he says this, he gets a raucous round of applause from the other guys who, believe in his school of thought around socialism, et cetera, et cetera. So I said, okay, that's fine. Anyway, so I take them for the first day. And then on the second day, they've got to write a test, which I'd set. So they write the test and the marks, and I mark it. And then I come back and I gave them all 51%. Everybody 51%. Now you can imagine, right? And the guy that puts up his hand was the loudest guy. He goes, I know I got better than 51%. Why did I get 51%? I said, no, but you are Mr. Socialism. This is socialism, right? This is, your effort doesn't matter. The outcome is exactly the same, you know? So I said to him, what happened was I marked everybody's marks. You can check this, the ticks in it. I took the class average and I gave everybody the class average. So even though he'd gotten like 74% or something, you got 74%, class average was 51%, but that's the class average. You said that this is the way the system works, right? And I think that's the only time that the penny drops for people is when you say free something, recognize there's no such thing as free. Somebody's paying. The question you got to ask is who's paying, right? And then you got to ask yourself, what role am I playing in making sure that the system is more sustainable?
I mean, to that point, Vusi, and that's a fantastic example. Like the real question is this, and you know, when it comes to the debate between socialism and capitalism, and I'm actually quite in the middle there. I think that you need a mix of both. What you really want is the exceptional student, the 91% or 99% or 105% student, to be saying, you know what, I don't mind being 80%, because if it raises you from 30% to 50 and you pass, that's okay, because it's the greater good being served. So that's kind of the example I would use is, you know, the exceptionalist people should be willing to take a little bit less so that everyone else can live above the passing line. And what I mean by that is, in an economy where you actually work out that it's important to have universal basic income. I think universal basic income, UBI, is becoming talked about more and more, and I think it's something that needs to happen in the world where we start seeing governments giving out grants. South Africa is quite frankly very socialist in nature, right? The way we have our social welfare net. But I do think it's important. I think it can't go away. In fact, I think it should be expanded. And I'm a capitalist. I'm a capitalist entrepreneur. Like, I think capitalism is important, but I think there are limits to capitalism. And I think that governments should actually say, look, you know, a large part of everyone here is, you know, it's a social and genetic lottery. Okay. Are you lucky enough to be born in the right family at the right time? Are you lucky enough to have the right DNA? And so, you know, we can take the outliers and say, hey, you know, you just got really lucky, you hit the genetic, lottery, the jackpot on both the social and genetic levels. But does that mean that society is better off or worse? Or do you need to have excess in your life? Do you need to have massive excess in your life? And or do we say, look, you know, if you really can be like the Elon Musks of the world, that's fine. But you know, through the process of what we have today is taxation and social redistribution. Is there a better way? And I'm not saying take anything away from guys like Elon or mega wealthy people. Absolutely not. I think that's important that we have them chasing, you know, their dreams. But when people look at the wealth that these guys create, that's not real like income, right? It's assets that have increased in value, etc. So that's the big debate with Elizabeth Warren. And I don't think that people appreciate that you can't actually say Elon's got $100 billion in cash lying around to distribute. He doesn't have that. He's busy running companies. He's busy doing. He's got equity. You know, you and I know more than anyone what illiquid equities look like. You know,
true story.
Exactly, and so social structures in society with UBI can really help, because what you really want to do is you're not trying to make the rich richer. What you're trying to make is the poor less poor. Okay, you're trying to help the bottom rung of society and say, look, if we can just raise you guys up so that your next generation doesn't suffer the way you suffered in life, we can build the next generation up, and we can eventually eradicate poverty over generations. The idea that we can eradicate poverty in a single generation is, I think it's a bit too ambitious. But if we said, look, 1 or 2 generations from now, we should have no poverty in our society, that is actually very doable. And that's my take on it. My take on it is you know.
Final question for you, and it's related, but like by a straw's hair, right? What do you think about what's going on in China at the moment with this crackdown on technology stocks and technology firms? And the reason I ask that is because China is often used as the model of government by some political parties in South Africa.
Yeah, so I think that China is not a democracy. Let's start with that, right? And they basically have a worldview which they will espouse at every turn, and that's fine. It's their prerogative. Their people keep them in power and decide that they want to live under this unified sort of Chinese, whether you want to look at
state, sure.
Yeah, one party state, whether you want to look at it as a cultural or a racial sort of leadership sort of viewpoint, that the Chinese culture is what they want to permeate through global society. So launching a central bank digital currency, having the yuan become the dominant sort of store of value, unit of account, whatever, global currency for the world. That's their view and their prerogative, okay? We as the rest of the world can sit back and say, look, we either accept those views or we fight those views or we don't engage with them or whatever, but we don't have the choice in how they operate their economy and what decisions they make. We can just choose to use the Chinese currency for trade, or use it or not use it, or buy their products or not buy products. Like, that's the whole point of free market capitalism, right? Capital will go where capital gets returned. And if they put these barriers in place where investors start pulling out of China and say, look, we can't invest in Chinese companies, we can't do this, they will then stimulate domestic demand and domestic investors. And maybe they succeed, maybe they don't. But my view is that there needs to be a mix of globalism and localism. Okay, so in South Africa, we actually do need some sort of exchange controls, at least for the short term right now. We do need to protect capital in South Africa. We need to create jobs. But there's a lot of other things we're doing really badly. Like, we're not allowing capital to easily flow into South Africa. Like, as a South African, citizen, but, expat, because I don't pay taxes in South Africa because I don't live in South Africa anymore. I can't easily move money into South Africa and buy companies and own companies in South Africa easily. Sure. The loop law, exchange controls, etc. They make it really, really difficult. And if I make an investment there and it's a big win, taking capital out of the country is hard. So we have these constraints in society that make it very difficult for international investors. So you've got to understand that, like, some of these things are relics of apartheid. Some of these laws existed. The apartheid government put it in. We've never repealed those laws, but now we're stuck with them. So there needs to be a rethinking around capitalism. But I mean, to your point on China, is that every country has a sovereign right to do whatever they want to do, as long as the people that are giving the politicians the power are comfortable with it. So you have to look at it as an abstraction that the people of China are okay with their politicians doing what they're doing, because otherwise, unless you argue that they're highly oppressed, which is, I mean, not evident.
Sure.
You could argue that that's the will of the people.
Great session, brother. I've loved this, and congratulations on this new investment, this new platform. It's really cool what you guys have done here, man.
Thank you. We're excited, and we hope to have you on soon. We've seen tons of comments. People are asking us to do a Waitroom, the two of us together, etc. So that's great. We'd love to have you on again.
Yeah, let's rock and roll. I know I owe you a call. I've been running around, but I'll definitely give you a ring, and let's do another one of these soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Vusi.
Regards to the family, brother.
You've crushed it, by the way. I think on YouTube we've had over 500, you're about 1,000 viewers total across Waitroom and YouTube, which is fantastic.
Amazing.
Great. Thanks, Vusi.
Brother.
Cheers. Bye-bye.